I will start my reading practice from the book Magic Words, and now I will start. But while the words were similarly positive, the description of restaurant one used more emotional language. The word amazing is more emotional than the word perfect, and the word enjoyable is more emotional than the word worthwhile. The increased emotionality in turn lead more people to pick that restaurant. For utilitarian products, however, the opposites occurred. For razors, emotionality backfired. Emotional reviews were less helpful, made people less willing to purchase whatever was reviewed. Because while emotionality is good for hedonic things, it's bad for more utilitarian ones. When picking and using hedonic products and services, emotion is a deciding factor. People want sports cars to be exciting, movies to be enjoyable, and vacations to be fun. So, when emotional words are used to describe hedonic things, people think they will like those things more. But when picking and using utilitarian products and services, evoking emotion isn't really the goal. People want glue that hardens quickly, gas that is inexpensive, and a toaster that easily makes toast. Utilitarian things are often bought to do a job, and people pick them because their thoughts rather than emotions suggest they will do that job well. Consequently, while someone might say a blender is amazing or delightful, this doesn't necessarily make others want to buy it. In fact, such emotional language often backfires because it violates people's expectations around what they are looking for. So much so much so that it may even lower trust in what was said and the person who said it. Overall, then, it's important to not only consider language's positivity but also its emotionality. When marketing a product, selling an idea, or even pitching ourselves, we often use positive language. Our product is great, our idea is innovative, and we are hardworking. Food is fantastic, blockchain is transformative, and our writing skills are excellent. Really, they are, I promise. But it's not enough to just say positive things. We need to consider the context. Brilliant, awesome, excellent, and superb are all words that suggest something is really, really good. But they differ in the amount of emotionality they involve and consequently may be more or less effective depending on the context. When marketing a product, service, or experience, for example, is it more hedonic or more utilitarian? Are people buying it for pleasure or enjoyment, or more functional or practical reasons? If it's more about enjoyment, emotional words like awesome and beautiful fit really well. Saying a movie is heartwarming, a destination is inspiring, or a meditation app is fantastic not only suggests those things are good but does so in a way that encourages purchase and action. If the product, service, or experience is more about practical functionality, however, those same positive words may backfire. Less emotional words like brilliant, flawless, and perfect will be more persuasive. Calling a dictation app brilliant rather than awesome, for example, should encourage purchase and use. The same holds for describing ourselves. Whether drafting a resume, filing out a, filling out a job application, or writing a dating profile, we are constantly pitching ourselves to others. Sure, we would say positive things rather than negative ones and use words like fun on dating profiles but not job applications. But it's more than that. For things like resume and job applications, most evaluators have a utilitarian outlook. Like buying a product to fill a need, they are looking for people who can solve a problem or add value. So don't just list positive adjectives, pick the right ones. In most situations, less emotionality should be better, and emotional language may backfire unless the company prides itself on its company culture or employees being part of the family. Things like dating profile, however, are usually more hedonic in nature. People are not looking to solve a problem. They are looking for someone who will make them happy. So emotionality should be more useful. Not just positive words but the right type of positive ones. The benefits of emotional language also vary over the course of social interactions. Many conversations are oriented around achieving something. Meetings are about making decisions. Customer service calls are about solving a problem, and sales pitches are about closing a deal. But although people often think it makes sense to jump into addressing the issue at hand, that's not actually the best course of action. When we analyzed hundreds of problem solving conversations, we found that connecting first was key, starting with warmer, more emotional language before diving into addressing the issue. Relationship building or maintenance helps set the stage for whatever comes next. It strengthens social connection and builds rapport. Consequently, warm emotional language is particularly useful at the beginning of a conversation. In a customer service context, for example, phrasing question as how can I help you, which uses more emotional language rather than how can I solve your issue, is more effective. But while starting with emotional language is beneficial, it only gets so far. Being nice is good, but eventually decisions need to be made and problems need to be solved. And that is where less emotional, more cognitive language becomes important. Indeed, when customer service agents used more emotional language at the beginning of conversations and more cognitive language is in the middle, customers were more satisfied with the interaction and purchased more afterward. Don't just solve and don't just connect. Connect, then solve. Activate activate uncertainty. Positivity and emotionality are two ways words can convey emotion and impact attitudes and actions. But one more aspect is worth noting. As anyone who has ever made a presentation can attest, keeping the audience engaged is challenging. Virtual meetings have only made this worse. The presentation is just another window on people's screen. Email is already open and it's easy to pretend to pay attention while doing something else. Content creators face a similar struggle. From publishers and media companies to marketers and influencers, everyone is trying to attract and hold attention. But the sheer multitude of available options makes this increasingly difficult to achieve. News articles appear next to dozens of substitutes, and rather than reading a whole article, most people skim a little and then switch to reading something else. Against this backdrop of endless distraction, the notion is often that interesting things succeed and everything else is doomed to fail. Articles about how new tech gadgets, for example, celebrity gossip or sports score, garnered lots of attention, while weightier topics like climate change or presentations about information security lull everyone to sleep. So, are presenters of less engaging topics just doomed to fail, or might there be ways to increase engagement even for topics that seem less naturally appealing? One common approach is to use something like clickbait. Sensational headlines like before you renew Amazon Prime, read this, or 6 common reasons you are gaining weight offer teasers that encourage people to click to learn more. Bad presentations often default to similar tactics, using superfluous cartoons, pictures of celebrities or other gimmicks to grab attention and make things seem more relevant. But while techniques like these can seem alluring, they are not as effective as they might seem. Clickbait is great for grabbing attention, but it rarely sustains it. While headlines like leading doctor reveals the worst carb you are eating get potential readers to click, which carb is it? I want to know. Once they start reading the article, they are often disappointed. Sure, the article says something about carbs, but it rarely lives up to the lofty promises sensationalized in the headline. So people open it, skim a couple sentences, and then leave. They never actually read the material. The same goes for presentation gimmicks, something they get a laugh or get people to look up from their laptops, but they don't really get people to deeply engage with the material. They grab attention, but they don't hold it. In these and similar situations, the distinction between attracting and holding attention is key. Senders don't just want recipients to open their emails, they want them to read them. Leaders don't just want employees to attend their presentations, they want them to listen to and internalize what was said. And non-profits, creators, and content marketers don't just want audience to glance at their policy briefs, YouTube videos, and white papers. They want them to stick around to consume the content. To explore what actually holds attention, some colleagues and I analyzed how almost a million people consumed tens of thousands of online articles, not just whether someone clicked on an article, but how much of it they read. Whether they read the headline and moved on or kept reading for a few paragraphs. Whether they skimmed the introduction and left or read the article all the way to the end. Some topics did a better job of holding readers' attention than others. Articles about sports, for example, tended to engender longer reads than articles about world news, and restaurant reviews tended to hold attention better than articles about education. But even controlling for what articles were about, how they were written also mattered. In particular, emotional language increased engagement. The more emotional language an article used, the more likely audience were to keep reading. Looking deeper, though, we found that not all emotions had the same effect. While some emotions encouraged sustained attention, others actually discouraged it. People were 30% more likely to finish an article that made them feel anxious, for example, than one that made them feel sad. And to understand why, we have to understand how emotional language shapes the way people see the world. Take anger and anxiety, both are negative states. Feeling angry doesn't feel good, and neither does feeling anxious. But while these two emotions are similar in some ways, one makes us feel much more certain than the other. Think about the last time you felt angry. An airline lost your bag, a referee blew a call, or a customer service representative hung up on you after you waited on hold. You probably felt pretty certain, sure that the airline, referee, or company screwed up and that they were to blame. Indeed, when we are angry, we tend to feel quite confident. Rather than doubt or hesitation, anger often involves righteous indignation or conviction that we are right and others are wrong. Anxiety, however, rarely involves such certainty. Think about the last time you felt anxious. Maybe you were worried about whether an airline had lost your bag, nervous that your team might lose, or concerned that you would be on hold for another 30 minutes. Anxiety is uncertain. It usually involves doubt, ambiguity, or insecurity, not knowing what will happen and being scared that it might be bad. Positive emotions also have different degree of certainty. Pride is pride is relatively certain, for example, while hope is often uncertain. It turns out that these differences in certainty have an important impact on sustained attention. Looking across thousands of pieces of content, we found that uncertain emotions encouraged engagement. Language that evoked uncertain emotions, that is, anxiety and surprise, lead readers to keep reading, while language that evoked certain emotions, example disgust, had the opposite effect. Uncertainty lead readers to stick around to resolve what they didn't know. If they were not sure what would happen next or how something would end, they stayed tuned to find out. Just like not knowing whether it will rain might encourage checking the weather. Not knowing what will happen lead people to keep reading to resolve the uncertainty. Thank you. That's it for the day.